Howdy howdy, and welcome back to Twist, that's This Week in Steam, where we go over what's happening in the world of Steam for the week, including things like news, new releases, announcements, deals, and usually a fun segment or two at the end. And to that end, this week we've got Visual Novel Fest going on Steam for a couple more days. Fanatical has kicked off their Steam sale in advance of the official Steam sale happening next week, and then we'll round things out with my first impressions of playing Monster Hunter Wilds, although I did not play this on the Steam Deck because man, it is looking pretty rough on that system. But we'll get to that in a little bit. For now, let's start this off with some news. And honestly, there isn't a ton of specific Steam news this week necessarily, but we did have a few interesting developments happening in the world of Steam games, starting off with the announcement of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 Remake being officially announced this week. And this is going to be releasing on July 11th. It's going to feature all of the original maps along with some new ones, and the same sort of goes for the skaters, where you'll have some new skaters, but then also a lot of the classic roster returning. Bam Margera will not be returning sadly, but that's probably not surprising given his rift with the Jackass crew in recent years. The soundtrack will include songs from the original game, which is pretty crucial for a Tony Hawk game, although I will say I'm expecting at least one or two absences here, probably due to rights issues considering the games are pretty old at this point. And beyond support for 4K resolution, enhanced textures, animation, and lighting effects, if you shoot for the digital deluxe version, you'll get access 3 days early, immediate access to the demo, and that version includes a bunch of Doom stuff, including bonus in-game music, decks, and customizations, but most importantly, the Doomslayer himself and Revenant as playable characters, which is just so good. And while all of this sounds fantastic, Activision did confirm that Tony Hawk 4's career mode will not be returning, but instead will feature a list of challenges to complete in 2 minutes, which is kind of a bummer, but hardly a deal breaker. And personally, I couldn't be more excited for this. I grew up on the Tony Hawk games right as I started getting into the original PlayStation, and given that most of the original content and skaters will be returning, I'm definitely a happy camper. And given that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remake play great on the Steam Deck, I expect the same will hold true for the 3 and 4 Remake. Moving on, we've still got Steam's Visual Novel Fest going on for a few more days, where you can get deep discounts on a lot of great narrative-heavy experiences. In addition to great deals across a range of classic visual novel titles like Danganronpa or Steins Gate, you can also find some free point shop items like a couple of avatars, and an avatar frame which doesn't look too shabby if I do say so myself. Now, the visual novel genre isn't one with which I have a ton of familiarity, but I did want to highlight a few that I played myself or at least know to be well regarded. For starters, you can grab Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, which was the first entry in the series I believe, which is on sale for $13.99, down from $19.99. Valhalla, the cyberpunk bartender simulator, is $10.04, down from $14.99. And in that same vein, if you're looking for a similar experience but want to swap in modern fantasy for sci-fi, and a bar for a coffee shop, the very cozy Coffee Talk is on sale for $6.49, down from $12.99. But my personal top pick from what I've seen so far from the Visual Novel Fest would have to be The Somnium Files, which is on sale for $7.99 versus $39.99. And having beaten this on the Switch a few years back, I can promise you it's a great story with fun detective mechanics and legitimately laugh out loud moments that I was not expecting. Seriously, these aren't always my cup of tea, but I do stand by the adventures of Konami Date and Aiba, and if you've never played one of these games before, this is one that I can confidently vouch for as a great entry into what is effectively a choose-your-own-adventure sort of experience. So yeah, lots to take in here, and considering the genre's slower nature, you could rack up hundreds of hours of great storytelling on the cheap, and given that these are typically 2D animated affairs, pretty much any of these are going to run great on the Steam Deck without taxing the battery too heavily. But now let's move on to even more deals by looking at some of the best deals this week, courtesy of Fanatical, specifically their spring sale. From now until March 16th, Fanatical's running their spring sale with hundreds of AAA and indie games available at deep discounts, but there are a couple of things to take note on that. First, since it's running until March 16th and the official Steam Spring Sale is supposed to kick off on March 13th, if you can bide your time, it would probably be best not to jump on most of these until the Steam Spring Sale kicks off, because with 3 days of overlap, then you'll be able to compare pricing for the best deals between Steam and Fanatical. Secondly, as I've been sharing on the community tab here on the channel this past week, the reason I say for most of these it would be best to wait is that they are doing flash sales every 24 hours where they provide particularly deep discounts for 3 to 5 games, which you can easily identify from their homepage where a timer ticks down letting you know how much longer you'll have until that specific deal expires. And this is actually where I cracked and finally bought Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 after a friend of mine was hyping it up, and more recently it got a colorful endorsement from Potato on Rooftop. By the way, Potato is streaming pretty regularly right now over on his channel, and it looks like he's doing some Path of Exile tomorrow around 3 p.m. Eastern if you want to check him out, but yeah, thanks for the heads up on this, Potato. And while Fanatical Spring Sale does have just hundreds of great deals happening right now, I did want to kind of run through at least a few that caught my eye in particular. RoboCop is still pretty cheap at $8.49 instead of $49.99. The Cthulian Nightmare Fuel Fishing Simulator Dredge is down to $10.62 from $24.99. Persona 4 Golden, which is just an incredible RPG and one of the few Personas I've actually beaten, and that is available for $10.79 instead of $19.99. The brain-bending blast from the OG Xbox's past, Psychonauts, is $4.99 from $19.99. I really need to get on this one myself. Also, the gorgeously retro boomer shooter Ion Fury is on sale for $7.99 versus $24.99. This one's a really fun time. I actually have this on the Switch myself, but went ahead and grabbed it here while it was on sale. But there are two particular games I wanted to highlight here that are just legitimate steals that play great on the Steam Deck, and I can't recommend them enough. The first would be Chorus, the space combat game, where you team up with a sentient starcraft known as Forsaken, and that is on sale for $2.49 instead of $24.99, and this game is just so much fun, and I really hope I can spend some more time with it this year. It's smooth, gorgeous, and has loads of fun missions to explore without being too overwhelming. And secondarily, I also recommend Tormented Souls, which is one of the best Resident Evil clones that I've played, where you'll explore an abandoned hospital after waking up missing an eye, which is horrifying, and you can snatch that up for $1.99 instead of $19.99. But hey, if you'd rather actually steal these two games, here's a free Steam key for each one of them that I'll throw on screen now for whoever's quick enough to redeem them. And if you do miss out, I mean, you can buy both of these games for under $5, and if you would like to pick up these or a range of other games through Fanatical, I'd definitely appreciate it if you wouldn't mind using my affiliate link below to help support the channel. But now let's transition to the party part of this video mullet so I can talk a little bit about my first impressions playing Monster Hunter Wilds, which just came out last week. And just to set expectations right up front, all of the footage here is captured on the PS5 Pro and not on the Steam Deck. I thought about buying a Steam copy, but most of my friends who insisted that I play with them were on PS5, so it made more sense to grab it there so we could squad up more easily. So to that end, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the game itself, and no performance metrics or anything like that. And my friends out west were key in my decision to even buy this game, because I have a reluctant relationship with the Monster Hunter series as a whole. Every time a new Monster Hunter comes out, I go through a range of emotions that sort of feels like the 5 stages of grief. Initially, I'm fairly indifferent to it and try to avoid it. Then my friends start bombarding me with texts because a few in particular are borderline obsessive about these games when they come out. And then I cave in and reluctantly buy it. But once I get there and spend a few hours running around, everything starts to click again, and then I start to legitimately get into it, and that's exactly what happened with Monster Hunter Wilds. After literally trading up to the PlayStation 5 Pro last weekend, I had some extra GameStop credit and used it to essentially get Wilds for free, with big air quotes that you can't really see right now, and then I started my solo journey, building out my hunter and getting to work getting refamiliarized with its mechanics, systems, and structure. And I'm not gonna lie, those first baby steps back into a Monster Hunter game, if you're not familiar with the series or have been away from it for years like I had, are definitely slow going at first. Don't get me wrong, the opening portions are action-packed thrill rides that feel like a primal Michael Bay movie, but getting familiar with everything else does take a little bit of time to get rolling. That would include customizing your character, choosing your weapons, remembering how the controls work, and figuring out how to navigate the game's litany of systems like crafting and upgrading your gear, taking on main missions, optional quests, event quests, field surveys, and assignments. It's a lot to take in, and the interface is just covered in cryptic icons and text. And for me, these titles have always felt like the gaming equivalent of taking the SATs or something. However, if you stick with it, just like pretty much every other Monster Hunter I've played before, it does start to click and it is a whole lot of fun. And that process of waiting for it to click really comes down to recalibrating your expectations, especially if you're coming from a background of action games that are more streamlined and straightforward. Yes, you fight big ol' monsters and gradually level up to unlock new and better gear, but the main thing to remember is that Monster Hunter Wilds doesn't just want you to go whale on a bunch of exotic dino hybrids, it wants you to feel like a monster hunter. And if you had to hunt towering beasts in real life, you'd do your homework and make careful preparations before carefully selecting the right tools for the job and then heading out to go hunt a monster. The problem is I always forget this when a new Monster Hunter drops, and where I'm expecting a non-stop action romp, it takes a few before I recalibrate and remember this is a game that wants you to savor it fully, enjoying its quieter moments of strategizing and the thrill of the hunt in equal measure. And after I remembered this, I started having a wonderful time with Monster Hunter Wilds. Riding your Sacred, which are basically raptors, through the deserts and lush jungles to hunt down Chattacabras or the much grosser Congalala is thrilling. Not just because squaring off against a giant enemy is inherently fun, but even the act of getting there is enjoyable thanks to Wild's auto-run system for your mount, where you can pretty much just hit up on the D-pad and it'll take you exactly where you need to go with no action needed on your part. Which might sound boring, but as your Sacred buddy takes you where you need to go, that frees you up to look around the environment like a tourist using your slinger to grapple items from a distance, so you're effectively prepping for the upcoming fight on the way by snatching up valuable resources along the way. And when you do get into the thick of the fight, it's fun to wail on an enemy until you open up a wound, and then snap into focus mode to use your slinger to target developing weak points, which deal increased damage in hilariously over-the-top attack sequences. But perhaps unsurprisingly, it really does shine brightest when you're playing with friends. When I was starting out solo, it was a little frustrating getting used to the dual blades once again, and not overly thrilling. But after I squatted up with a bunch of my friends and we were running in a hunting group to track down monsters, it got exponentially more enjoyable. And since each hunter has a palico on support duty, it's just really cool seeing your team of 8 bouncing around vivid environments to unleash absolutely brutal attacks on these giant hulking monsters. So suffice it to say that yes, Wilds is growing on me, just like Rise and World and generations before that, where I was also dragged into previous entries. The learning curve is steep, but there are a lot of quality of life provisions that make it easier than past entries. Having your Sacred automatically take you where you need to go if you want takes a lot of the guesswork out of where you're supposed to be going at any given point. And you can opt to leave contextual tooltips on for as long as you'd like to keep reminding you of how to navigate its systems and combat, and all of this is deeply customizable, so if you're a veteran who doesn't really need the extra visual clutter, you can turn it off, but if you're like me and every new Monster Hunter feels a little bit overwhelming, Capcom have done a great job of making sure you can custom tailor its assistance as aggressively as you'd like, and still have a good time with it. I will say the story is not at all appealing to me outside of the really cool cutscenes that show new monsters manifesting. I kinda just skimmed the dialogue between characters. It's not that it's a bad story necessarily, I'm just not personally invested in it, and I'm most interested in getting to bigger and beefier monsters to contend with, and ranking up as quickly as I can to get to the real meat of the experience, which is having fun with my friends taking down towering bosses together, and Wilds gives me exactly that experience. Alright, and that's it for this episode of Twist. Again, this is a fairly new format for me, trying out weekly updates, and while I'm still not sure if these will come out every single Saturday, I'm going to do my best for the foreseeable future to do just that. But if you do have any suggestions for segments you'd like to see in this format, please do let me know in the comments below. Coming up on the channel, I'm working on a video about how the Steam Deck disrupted my console gaming habits, and the week after that, I'll be focusing primarily on the official Steam Deck Spring Sale when it kicks off on the 13th. As always, thank you so much for your time and hanging out here with me on the channel, as I very much appreciate it. Take care, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.